The day Harry found out he wasn't like other kids started with whispers. It wasn't the first time people had treated him differently. He had spent 11 long years in the cupboard under the stairs, ignored, called names, and forced to clean up after the Dursleys. But this morning felt different. There was a letter on the doormat, the kind he had always dreamed about. Except this wasn't from Hogwarts. The paper was black, sealed with a blood-red wax emblem he had never seen before, a serpent coiled around a crown. Harry hesitated for a second, running a hand over the lightning scar that had never really burned with pain. Just a strange, itching curiosity whenever Voldemort's name was mentioned. He had always wondered what it meant, why he was marked, why people treated him like he was special. Maybe this letter was the answer. When he broke the seal, the words inside seemed to crawl across the page. They promised power, knowledge, and a place where he wouldn't be ignored anymore. "You are ready," it said. "The world will bow to your choice. The Dark Lord waits, and he has chosen you." Harry's heart pounded. 11 years of being small, powerless, and unwanted had taught him one thing: if you want respect, you have to take it. And for the first time, a voice inside him whispered that maybe he could. Maybe he didn't have to be the boy who lived for everyone else's expectations. Maybe he could be the boy who ruled by the time he got to the train station. The Hogwarts Express felt smaller somehow, and the crowd of students seemed almost ordinary, mundane, unimportant. He looked around for Ron and Hermione, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The letter had included instructions: meet the others at the forest by the third moon of the first week. Show your mark, and you will belong. Harry had no idea what that meant yet, but the idea of belonging, of finally being wanted, ignited a fire he had never known. Hogwarts Dumbledore, the Sorting Hat, none of it seemed real anymore. Why would he follow rules that had made his life miserable for so long? Maybe the Dark Lord could offer something the headmaster never could: respect, power. A family that didn't treat him like he was invisible. The Sorting Hat tried to speak to him in whispers later that evening. "Ah, you have ambition. Cunning, but also a spark of bravery. Do you know where you truly belong?" Harry swallowed hard. He could feel the pull of Slytherin, sure. But he felt something darker, to a thrill at thinking of what it might mean to stand on the other side of the rules. "Not your choice," he whispered back, almost to himself. "I choose my own way." And with that, he felt the hat hesitate, confused, but it let him go. He would wear green and silver, but not to serve Hogwarts. He would wear it to serve himself, and soon, to serve someone far more terrifying than any teacher or headmaster by the third night. Harry had slipped away under the cover of darkness, carrying the letter tucked tightly in his robes. The forest was silent, almost too silent, and the trees seemed to lean in as if watching him. Then, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. A figure stepped forward, tall, cloaked, and commanding, eyes glinting with a mix of cruelty and admiration. "Harry Potter," the voice said, soft but deadly. "We have been waiting for you." Harry felt his stomach twist, not with fear, but with anticipation. This was the moment he had been waiting for, even if he hadn't realized it yet. The boy who had been nothing to everyone suddenly felt like everything to someone, and it made his pulse race. The figure extended a hand. "Are you ready to leave the world that has held you back? Are you ready to step into power?" Harry looked down at the lightning scar, at the Dursleys' cruel faces flashing in his memory, at the teachers who pretended to care, and then back to the shadow before him. Without hesitation, he nodded. Yes, and in that moment, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, became Harry Potter. The boy who would choose darkness. A boy who would learn the price of power in ways no one could have imagined. Harry followed the shadow through the forest, the trees closing around them like walls of silence. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, almost like blood. He didn't feel scared. Not really. The fear he had always felt at the Dursleys, the whispers of classmates, the nagging of teachers, none of that mattered here. All that mattered was that someone had noticed him, wanted him, believed he could be more than just a boy with a lightning scar. The shadow led him to a clearing where others waited, cloaked and quiet, their faces hidden in hoods. Harry's heart pounded, a mix of excitement and nerves. They weren't smiling, weren't friendly, but somehow that made him trust them more. He had never been welcomed with warmth before. This felt honest. A figure stepped forward, taller than the rest, his presence commanding the silence. Voldemort Harry had only ever seen him in whispers, in nightmares, in the scar that burned when the name was spoken. But here, standing in the moonlight, Voldemort's red eyes glimmered like fire. "Harry," he said, voice soft but sharp enough to make Harry's stomach tighten. "You have come." Most would run, scared of what they do not understand. But not you. You see beyond the fear. That is why I have chosen you. Harry swallowed, trying not to let his awe show too much. He had always wanted to be seen, wanted someone to recognize his potential. And here was the Dark Lord himself saying exactly that. "You will learn much here," Voldemort continued, circling him slowly, like a predator inspecting a new prey. "Power is not given. It is taken. Knowledge is not shared. It is earned. And loyalty. Loyalty is tested." Harry nodded, gripping his wand tighter. He had barely held it before. Now it felt like an extension of himself. "I'm ready," he whispered. The lessons began immediately. The others older students, some barely more than teenagers, already hardened by cruelty and ambition, taught him spells that Dumbledore had never approved. Dark charms that made curses sting like fire. Harry practiced relentlessly, feeling the thrill of power with each new skill mastered. The more he learned, the less he remembered the cupboard under the stairs. The less he thought about the Dursleys. The more he felt alive. They pushed him, challenged him, taunted him, and yet he thrived. Every time he got it right, Voldemort's eyes seemed to sparkle with approval. And Harry realized something he hadn't before. Approval could feel like air. It could make you feel untouchable. But the Forest Knights weren't all training. There were tests. The first was a simple one on the surface, but it burned in Harry's mind long after. Voldemort handed him a task. Go into the nearby village. Find a shopkeeper who had spoken ill of the Dark Lord and make sure he understood his error. Harry had never hurt anyone before. The thought should have terrified him. But when he saw the man mocking the Dark Lord in whispers to a neighbor, Harry felt a cold thrill. A small spell, barely a flick of his wand, and the man fell, terrified and shaking. Harry didn't feel remorse. He felt power. It was intoxicating. He had never been in control like this, never felt the ability to bend someone else to his will. And suddenly, the boy who had always been ignored was the one holding the fear in his hands. Back in the forest, Voldemort observed quietly. "Fear is respect," he said. "Never forget that. Those who fear you will obey you. Those who love you may betray you. Always trust fear first." Harry nodded again. He thought about Hogwarts, about Ron and Hermione, about the Sorting Hat. They had tried to tell him who he was, what he should be. Here, under the stars, he was discovering what he could be. And it scared him not because he felt danger, but because he liked it. By the time dawn crept through the trees, Harry had changed. Not physically, but in the way he carried himself. He wasn't the small, timid boy who hid under the stairs. He was a boy who commanded attention, even in silence. The other Death Eaters watched him with a mix of suspicion and admiration. Some whispered that the Dark Lord had a new favorite. Some wondered if he could be trusted. But Harry didn't care about their opinions. He had been invisible for too long. Now, he was seen. That feeling alone made every wrong choice he would ever make feel worth it. Harry had begun to understand what it meant to belong. It wasn't friendship, it wasn't love, it wasn't loyalty. It was power. And once you tasted it, there was no going back. The days blurred together in the forest. Harry woke each morning to the cold ground beneath him, the smell of damp leaves, and the quiet murmur of the others preparing for training. He didn't miss the warmth of the Dursleys' house, not really. Even their cruel words had felt like chains compared to the freedom he now had, freedom to choose his own path. Each day, he learned something new. Curses that made shadows dance like flames, charms that could break doors without touching them, and spells that could twist the minds of others. Every small success made him feel sharper, stronger, more alive. He realized, almost with surprise, that he was beginning to enjoy the taste of control. Voldemort's lessons were never gentle. Sometimes the Dark Lord would watch him for hours without speaking, and Harry would sweat under the weight of that gaze, wondering what he had done wrong. Other times, the tests were brutal. A simple charm that went wrong could mean humiliation, or worse, a warning to the others about what happened to failure. But Harry didn't mind. He felt the thrill in knowing he could succeed where others might falter. For the first time in his life, being clever wasn't just a way to survive, was a way to win, to impress, to rise. And rise he did. One evening, as the moon painted silver stripes across the forest floor, Harry was given his first real mission. Voldemort's voice cut through the shadows. "A family has spoken against me," he said. "A father and daughter. You will go, Harry. You will make them understand fear." The words were simple, but the weight of them made Harry's chest tighten. He had never hurt anyone, not really. But he had come this far. He had chosen this path. The spark of excitement mixed with fear. And the mixture was almost intoxicating. He found the family in their small cottage at the edge of the village. The girl staring wide-eyed at him, her father frozen in terror. Harry raised his wand, and for a moment, the memories of Hogwarts, the classrooms, the sorting hat, even Hermione's worried face flashed in his mind. But they felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. This was his choice now. He whispered a curse he had practiced over and over, a small, controlled charm designed to frighten rather than destroy. The father dropped to his knees, trembling, and the girl clutched at him, crying. Harry felt something unfamiliar pang of guilt, but it was quickly swallowed by the rush of power. They were listening to him. They feared him. And that fear, he realized, was intoxicating. When he returned to the forest, Voldemort's red eyes seemed almost approving. "Good," the Dark Lord said, voice smooth like silk over steel. "You understand the first lesson? Respect comes from fear. Power is earned by those who dare to take it." Harry nodded, hiding the strange mix of guilt and pride he felt. He didn't want to disappoint Voldemort. More than that, he didn't want to feel small again. He had come too far for that. Over the next few weeks, Harry's skill grew, and so did his confidence. He started to see Hogwarts in a different light, not as a school, but as a place full of rules designed to keep students obedient. He thought about the teachers, about Dumbledore, about the prophecy everyone whispered about. For the first time, he wondered if the boy who lived was supposed to be someone else entirely. And maybe, he thought, it was better this way. Maybe being feared, being powerful, was the only way to truly live. Even the other Death Eaters began to notice. Some whispered behind his back, wary of the boy who was barely 11, yet carried himself like someone much older. Others watched silently, testing him, waiting for him to falter. But Harry had learned long ago that hesitation was a weakness. He had been ignored his whole life. Now he moved forward with certainty, and certainty made people uneasy. That unease, he realized, was a tool. He could use it. He would use it. By the time the third moon had passed, Harry was no longer just the boy who had arrived in the forest. He was becoming something darker, something sharper. He still remembered the cupboard under the stairs, the Dursleys' cruel laughs, and the sense of being invisible, but those memories didn't hurt anymore. They were fuel. And with every day spent under Voldemort's guidance, Harry Potter felt himself shedding the boy who lived. He was stepping into a new identity, one that no one could ignore, one that demanded attention, respect, and fear. Harry's first real taste of power had changed him. But the forest held more tests, more lessons, and more darkness ahead. The forest was quieter now, almost eerily still, as Harry made his way back to the clearing. The first hints of doubt had started creeping in, small and hesitant, like shadows at the edge of his mind. He had felt a thrill in scaring the family, in bending them to his will. But now, lying awake at night beneath the rough branches, he wondered if he had gone too far. Not that he would admit it, never to Voldemort. Never to anyone, but the girl's wide eyes, full of terror and disbelief, haunted him. He pushed the memory away, telling himself it was weakness. That weakness had no place here. Voldemort seemed to sense it before Harry could even recognize it himself. That night, the Dark Lord appeared in the clearing without warning, his presence sharp as a blade. "Fear is not guilt," Voldemort said, voice calm but cutting. "You are not here to feel sorry for those who fail to understand. You are here to command, to dominate, to rise above the petty morality that binds ordinary people. If you allow guilt to weigh you down, you will be crushed before you even begin." Harry nodded quickly, hiding the small knot of unease in his chest. He wanted to believe Voldemort was right. After all, he had chosen this path. He had stepped away from being powerless, and yet, something nagged at him, something he couldn't quite name. The following days brought new lessons and harsher tests. He was tasked with observing, manipulating, and even punishing other young wizards who were suspected of disloyalty. Each mission was small in scale, but heavy in consequence. One boy, barely older than Harry, had laughed at a joke about the Dark Lord and was found in the clearing, kneeling as Harry delivered a minor curse under Voldemort's watchful eyes. The boy's tears burned Harry in ways he didn't want to admit. But when Voldemort nodded with satisfaction, that sting was replaced with a darker thrill. Control, Harry realized, had a taste unlike anything he had known. The power he wielded made people bend, made them tremble, and for the first time, Harry felt like the center of a world that had always ignored him. Still, the whispers of doubt returned at night. In the quiet, he thought of Hogwarts, the friends he might have had, the lessons he could have learned under Dumbledore's care. He remembered the Sorting Hat, how it had teased him about bravery and ambition, and he felt a fleeting pang of nostalgia. But he shook it off. That Harry, the boy who had hoped for acceptance, was gone. He had chosen this path, and there was no turning back. One evening, Voldemort presented him with a new challenge, one that would mark a turning point. A Muggle village had been harboring rumors, sharing stories about the Dark Lord that angered him. Harry was instructed to confront them, but this time, the task wasn't just to instill fear, it was to make them understand their mistake, to leave a permanent mark of obedience. Harry's stomach churned as he approached the village, wand trembling in his hand. He could feel the weight of responsibility, and for the first time, he realized what that power truly demanded: cruelty, calculation, and the willingness to let fear replace compassion by the time he returned to the forest. The sun had barely risen, casting pale light through the branches. He felt different, not just stronger, but heavier. The thrill of power was still there, but it was tinged now with something else: the recognition that every choice had a cost, that each step deeper into darkness took something from him that he could never reclaim. Voldemort watched him silently, eyes glinting like coals. and Harry wondered if the Dark Lord could see that flicker of uncertainty. Maybe he could. Maybe that was part of the test. And maybe, Harry thought quietly, it didn't matter. He had already chosen, and there was no turning back. That night, lying beneath the trees, Harry stared up at the stars and felt a strange calm. The forest was his home now, the Dark Lord his guide, and fear his companion. He had become someone else entirely, a boy no one could ignore, a boy who had discovered the intoxicating taste of power. And though a part of him whispered questions he dared not answer, another part, stronger, darker, hungrier, thrilled at the possibilities that lay ahead. Harry was now fully aware of the cost of his choices. But the pull of power and belonging kept him moving forward. The first time Harry saw Hogwarts again, it wasn't the school he remembered. From the distance, the towers looked the same, glowing softly in the morning sun. But to him, they felt smaller, weaker, like a world that had outgrown him. The thought made a strange surge of pride ripple through him. He had left that life behind. Left behind the cupboard, the cruel Dursleys, the teachers who had scolded him for being different. Now he was someone else entirely, someone powerful. Someone feared Voldemort had commanded him to observe to test how much Harry had learned, and to see if the boy could navigate the world of light while holding darkness in his hands. He had to move among wizards who once called him the boy who lived as if it were a blessing, not a burden. Harry entered the castle under the cover of shadows, cloaked and silent, and immediately felt the difference. The students who once whispered about him looked smaller, weaker. Some stared in awe, some in fear, and a few tried to smile as if nothing had changed. But Harry didn't recognize them or himself. He had changed too much for familiarity to matter. He walked through the hallways, wand hidden, eyes sharp. He could hear voices, familiar names like Ron and Hermione, but he didn't stop. Their voices sounded childish, worried, naive. A part of him almost felt pity, almost missed the boy he might have been if he had stayed. But it was fleeting. That Harry was gone. The boy in the cloak, with a scar that no longer burned but pulsed with quiet promise, was in control now. Then he saw them, Hermione, Ron, even Ginny, clustered together in the Great Hall. They were talking about the usual things, classes, homework, Quidditch. But their conversation froze when Harry appeared, and he felt the rush of power flood through him. They recognized him. They feared him. That fear was intoxicating. It had a taste he would never forget. For a moment, he almost smiled, but the corner of his mouth betrayed nothing. Voldemort's voice echoed in his mind, clear as though he were standing behind him. Power is shown, not explained. You do not ask for respect. You take it. Harry raised his wand, and a small curse shot from the tip, not deadly. Not permanent, just enough to make the candles flicker violently and the students stumble back. Whispers erupted. Eyes widened. And in that moment, Harry understood fully what Voldemort had been teaching him. The world responded to fear, and fear obeyed him. Hermione stepped forward, shaking her head, her voice trembling but defiant. "Harry, what are you doing?" she demanded. There was a mixture of disbelief, hope, and sorrow in her tone, but Harry felt nothing. Or maybe he felt too much pride, certainty, power. He could see the disbelief in her eyes, the fear she tried to hide. And it thrilled him in a way he couldn't have imagined months ago. "I'm choosing," he said quietly, letting the word hang in the air. "I've always had to survive. Now I choose who I serve." Ron tried to step forward, but Harry didn't wait. He flicked his wand again, a small jinx that sent Ron stumbling backward. It wasn't meant to hurt, but it reminded them all that Harry had changed. No longer the timid boy under the stairs, he was deliberate, sharp, dangerous. And in that danger, there was something hypnotic. Even fear had its allure by the time he disappeared back into the forest. The whispers of the students still echoed in the corridors. The boy, he's different. He's darker. I don't think I've ever seen him like that. Harry didn't hear them. He felt the thrill of control, the quiet power of choice. He was walking a path no one else could follow, and the knowledge of that freedom felt like fire in his veins. He had become something more than a student, more than a boy who lived. He was his own force now, and the world would learn to respect it or fear it. That night, lying beneath a cold canopy of trees, Harry let himself feel it fully, the thrill, the fear, the certainty that he had left the old life behind. Hogwarts would never be the same, and neither would he. A part of him wondered if he had made the right choice, but it was a fleeting thought. He had power, he had recognition, and for the first time in his life, he belonged somewhere. That, more than anything, was worth the cost. Harry has now confronted the world he left behind, and the consequences of his choice are becoming real. The forest felt like home now, its shadows comforting rather than threatening. Harry moved among the Death Eaters like he belonged, no longer the boy who had arrived trembling and unsure. Every lesson, every mission, every test had shaped him into someone sharp, calculating, and, most importantly, powerful. Voldemort's eyes followed him constantly, sometimes with approval, sometimes with a quiet, dangerous expectation. And Harry thrived under that pressure. His new life was not easy. There were other young Death Eaters who resented him, whispers behind his back, veiled challenges, tests meant to see if he would falter. Harry ignored most of it, watching, learning, always calculating. He realized quickly that among the Dark Lord's followers, loyalty was fragile, respect was earned, and fear was currency. And Harry had more than enough of that now. The boy who had once been ignored by the Dursleys was becoming someone no one dared. Ignore Voldemort's assignments grew darker. Harry was asked to observe towns, to report those who might defy the Dark Lord, to intimidate families who whispered the wrong things. Each task demanded cruelty, a precision that left no room for mercy. At first, Harry hesitated, the faint echo of the Hogwarts boy whispering inside him. But that whisper grew quieter with every success, drowned out by the thrill of control. The power to bend others, to twist fear into obedience, became addictive. He began to anticipate Voldemort's tests, meeting them with confidence. And the Dark Lord's approval was more intoxicating than the thrill of magic itself. One evening, a mission arrived that would define him further. A small Muggle village had sheltered refugees who had opposed Voldemort, offering them food and shelter. Harry was sent alone, wand at the ready, instructions clear. Make them see the cost of defiance. Let them know the Dark Lord watches. Harry moved silently through the streets, unseen but all-seeing, and the villagers stared, whispers dying in their throats. He didn't feel fear this time, only focus, control, a cold sense of purpose. Each word he spoke, each gesture of magic, carved obedience into the hearts of those who had dared to resist. By the end of the night, Harry walked away without a backward glance. No pity, no guilt. Just the satisfaction of having done what was asked and done it well. Back in the forest, the other Death Eaters gathered around, their eyes a mix of awe and envy. Some tried to challenge him, to test if his youth made him weak, but Harry had learned. Every duel, every sparring match, every lesson in darkness had sharpened him. When he raised his wand, it wasn't just skill guiding him, it was strategy, calculation, and a cold, merciless clarity that left his opponents off balance before the first curse even left his wand. He felt unstoppable, and in that moment, he realized he didn't want to be anything else. Voldemort approached him, his red eyes gleaming. "You are learning well, Harry. You understand that loyalty is more than words, it is action. You understand that power is not given, it is seized. And you understand Fear is your greatest ally. Harry nodded, a quiet thrill coursing through him. Fear had always been something he felt, something imposed on him. Now it was something he wielded. It made him stronger, sharper, and he knew that he would never let it go. But late at night, when the forest was silent and the other Death Eaters slept, Harry felt the faintest flicker of what he had left behind. Hogwarts friends. Even the boy who had hoped to be loved, they lingered on the edges of his mind like ghosts. And yet, even as he remembered, he reminded himself of the truth. That boy no longer existed. He had chosen this path, and the forest, the power, the Dark Lord, they were now his world. And in that world, there was no turning back. Harry Potter. The boy who had lived for others had fully begun to live for himself. And in doing so, he had become a boy who would be feared, a boy who would command, a boy who had embraced the darkness that once terrified him. Harry is now fully walking the path of the Dark Lord, gaining power, respect, and fear, but the forest still holds lessons, and his journey is far from over. It was late one evening when Harry heard voices near the edge of the forest, voices he hadn't expected to hear again. He crept closer, wand hidden, heart steady, but there was a strange tension in his chest. The figures emerged from the shadows, moving carefully, whispering. Hermione, Ron, even Ginny. They were searching for him, looking for answers for the boy they had once known. Harry watched them from behind the trees, and for the first time in weeks, he felt the faint stir of something he hadn't expected. Recognition, but it wasn't the same. Recognition of friendship or warmth. It was the recognition of power, the knowledge that he had changed, and that they would never understand what he had become. He stepped out from the shadows, wand raised but not pointed, his cloak brushing the damp leaves. "You shouldn't have come here," he said quietly, voice calm but carrying an authority that surprised even him. The three froze, eyes wide, confusion and fear mixing in their expressions. Harry, what happened to you?" Hermione asked, her voice trembling. "This isn't you. You're scaring us." Harry felt a flicker of the boy he had been, the one who wanted to be loved and accepted, but he swallowed it down. That boy was gone. Now, there was only the boy who had chosen power, the boy who had embraced fear as a tool, the boy who had stepped into darkness willingly. "I'm still me," Harry said, almost whispering, "just a me you never understood. I don't belong in the world you think I should. One belong here. With power, with choice, with fear that listens." Ron took a step forward, but Harry didn't flinch. He didn't need to. The wand in his hand was not just a weapon, it was a statement. He had learned to command, to intimidate, to control. And he did. Hermione's eyes welled with tears. "But you don't have to do this," she said, voice cracking. "You don't have to follow him. We could help you. We still care about you." Harry looked at her, at the concern etched on her face, at the hope she was clinging to, and for a moment he felt its old pull. The echo of friendship and trust. But it was quickly replaced by something stronger, darker. He thought of the cupboard under the stairs, of the years of being ignored, of the thrill of finally being seen, finally being feared. That was real. That was power. That was belonging. "I chose this," he said softly, letting the words sink. "I chose to stop being the boy everyone ignored. I chose to be more than what you see. And I can't go back, not now, not ever." Hermione opened her mouth, but he shook his head. "You can't understand. You're not ready. You never were." The tension hung thick between them, the air heavy with unspoken words, anger, fear, and loss. Then Harry lowered his wand slightly, a gesture that was almost merciful. "Go back," he said. "Go before you regret staying. Before you see what I've become, what I'm capable of. There's no place for hope here anymore." only power. The three looked at him, fear and disbelief shining in their eyes, before slowly retreating. Their footsteps fading into the night. Harry watched them go, the forest suddenly quiet again. For the first time, he allowed himself a deep breath, a strange mixture of triumph and loneliness swirling inside him. He had chosen his path, defended it, and proven to himself and to them that he was no longer the boy who lived for others. He had become someone else entirely. Someone stronger, sharper, darker. And as he stood there, alone beneath the cold moonlight, Harry realized something he hadn't thought before. Power could protect. Power could command. Power could belong, but it also isolated. The world he had stepped into was thrilling, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. And he knew that by embracing it, he had left behind everything that had ever been familiar, everything that had ever been soft or safe. There was no turning back, only forward. Into the darkness he now owned. Harry has now faced his first real confrontation with his old life, solidifying his transformation and embracing the consequences of his choice. The forest was quiet, almost unbearably so. Harry moved through it with ease now, every step confident, every glance sharp. The boy who had arrived trembling in the darkness was gone. In his place stood someone who had learned quickly, who had embraced fear and power as tools, who had decided long ago that being small and overlooked was no longer an option. Tonight, he would prove it. Voldemort was waiting, as always, his red eyes gleaming in the moonlight. "Harry," he said softly, a dangerous smile curling on his lips. "Tonight, you will show me you are ready to step fully into the world I have prepared for you. Fear is your ally. Loyalty is earned. Power is your right." Harry nodded, gripping his wand tightly. He felt the familiar rush of excitement, the thrill that had carried him through every challenge, every test, every moment of doubt. This was what he had chosen. This was what he had become. The mission was simple but decisive. Infiltrate a small Muggle settlement that had defied the Dark Lord. Spread the message of fear and ensure obedience. Harry moved like a shadow, unseen, unheard, calculating each step. As he reached the settlement, he saw families huddled together, whispers of fear already spreading as the older Death Eaters had warned. Harry raised his wand, and for the first time, he allowed a part of himself to shine that had been dormant for so long. The thrill of being powerful. A single flick of his wrist, a simple incantation, and the villagers trembled. His words were precise, chilling, and absolute. The Dark Lord sees all. Disobedience will not be forgiven. The fear in their eyes was intoxicating. The power he held over them felt almost alive, a force that coursed through him and made him stand taller, feel sharper, feel untouchable. No one had ever looked at him this way. No one had ever obeyed him without question. He realized in that moment that he had stepped completely beyond the boy who had waited for love or approval. He didn't need it. He had something far stronger. Returning to the forest, Voldemort's approval was unmistakable. "You have learned well," the Dark Lord said. "You understand the nature of fear. You understand the power it gives. And you understand that once chosen, the path cannot be abandoned. You are ready, Harry Potter. Ready to serve. Ready to rule. Ready to be feared." Harry felt a shiver of satisfaction. He had passed every test, faced every shadow of doubt, and proven that he belonged in a world no one else could survive. That night, lying beneath the canopy of trees, Harry let himself feel the full weight of what he had become. He was alone, yes, but he had chosen this. He had stepped away from the boy who lived for others, who hoped for kindness and friendship. He had embraced the darkness, the power, the fear, and in doing so, he had finally found belonging. It was not soft or easy or warm, but it was real, as the first rays of dawn filtered through the branches. Harry looked at the scar on his forehead, now more a symbol of choice than destiny. He thought of Hogwarts, of friends, of the boy he once was, but those memories were distant, almost unreal. He had moved beyond them. Harry Potter, 11 years old, had chosen the Dark Lord, and in that choice, he had become something more than anyone could have imagined. A young Death Eater, a master of fear, a boy who lived not for others, but for power, control, and the darkness he now called home. And with that, the forest seemed to close around him, silent, watchful, waiting. Harry smiled faintly, the kind of smile that promised both danger and certainty. He was ready. He had chosen, and there was no turning back. The boy who lived was gone. The boy who ruled had begun. The story ends here, with Harry fully embracing the darkness, marking the turning point of his life at just 11, a chilling twist on the world we thought we knew.